bigger picture. You see why I say that the Nation of Islam does not really honor the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Yeah, sure, they put his picture up and they talk about the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and things like that, and, but they don't celebrate his birthday. They don't celebrate his birthday as true. That's truly the Savior's day. Elijah is the Savior. Elijah was the Savior and the messenger and the Savior. Why do I say that? Am I taking anything away from Fard Muhammad, the so-called founder of the Nation of Islam? Right? He can claim to be the founder of the Nation of Islam, right? Group that a name that he came up with, right? He can claim to be the founder of that. But if you look at a lot of the teachings of the Nation of Islam, a lot of that is Freemasonry. A lot of it is Islam mixed. A lot of that was taken from Moorish science. And there's good proof, good evidence that Fard was once a member of Noble Drew Ali's Moorish Science Temple. But that's neither here nor there. I always say that he just took a lot of the lessons from over there and brought them over into Detroit and started teaching and went under a whole nother name and started, he wanted to do his own version of the Moorish Science Temple, which became the Nation of Islam. Now, with all that being said, like I said, the message is there's nothing new that's being said from that message, other than the adding that the black man is God. Now, Elijah Muhammad, I liken Elijah Muhammad and Fard Muhammad because, like I said, they celebrate Fard Muhammad's birthday February 26 every year. He was supposedly born 1877. February 26, 1877. That's the date they give, which has not really been proven, but okay. Now, Fard is just as big a mystery as God himself, or the so-called God that people believe in, the mystery God and whatnot. People seen Fard and, the people within the 3.5 years he was around and founded the Nation of Islam, they really never knew nothing about him. They never really knew much about him other than what he cared to provide, which there was no real proof about that. But my point being, I put them in the category of Jor-El and Superman. Y'all know the movie, the trilogy and the series, the Superman series. Superman had a father called Jor-El, right? Superman had a father called Jor-El. And it wasn't until, according to the story, that Jor-El raised Superman with knowledge. He gave Superman knowledge because knowledge is power. Keep in mind, knowledge is what gives communities, organizations, movements power. So Fard provided Elijah and the followers with knowledge, gave Elijah the knowledge, most of the knowledge and whatnot. So he was able to take a movement forward. Same thing with Superman. Once his father gave him the knowledge of who he was, like Fard gave Elijah and the nation knowledge of who they are, the so-called lost black race, the so-called lost found tribe of Shabazz. Once he gave them knowledge of self, right? The knowledge of who they are, which wasn't really, that really wasn't knowledge. That it was good for them. I'm gonna just leave it at that. But once he supposedly gave them knowledge of self, they were able to build a strong organization, a strong community, right? A strong nation within a nation. They were able to build that based on discipline, based on focus and future thinking. It's people seeing the bigger picture, people who want better. Now, Elijah Muhammad, the honorable Elijah, most honorable Elijah Muhammad, was able to convey that message for 40 years. He was able to convey that message for 40 years. So it's like the Jor-El and Superman story. Do the world look at Jor-El as Superman, or do they look at Superman as Superman? Do they look at Jor-El, who was behind the scenes, who gave Superman knowledge in order for him to become Superman? Or, like I said, they look at Superman for actually doing the work and being Superman. People look at Superman. People look at Superman who is actually performing the work of a Superman. Elijah Muhammad, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, was a Superman because he did the work for 40 years. Fard left in 3.5 years. Fard came, got arrested, left in 3.5 years. Elijah Muhammad, the honorable Elijah Muhammad, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, had to do that work for 40 years. That's a Superman. And then that Superman spawned other Supermen or men who aspire to be supermen. Minister Farrakhan, Silas Muhammad, Royal Muhammad, all them people that came, Marvin Muhammad, all those offshoots that came out of the Nation of Islam. That Superman inspired a lot of wannabe supermen who came up and tried to be the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but they never fit into the shoes of such a great giant. You see, Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, was Superman because he raised a race of supermen and superwomen, clean people, disciplined people. Of course, you're going to have your defects. Of course, you're going to have defects like your Malcolm X's, like your Clarence 13 X's. Of course, you're going to have your defects, right? Who went against the message and went against the messenger. But that's going to happen along the way. He raised far more greater people than any man ever did. Hell, even Malcolm X, who became a defector, you wouldn't know of Malcolm X if it wasn't for Elijah Muhammad, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I don't understand how the Nation of Islam doesn't honor the Superman, but you honor Joel. You're supposed to honor the son, not the father. You honor the son. You see, because the son carries the power. The son carries the power. The father gives the son his knowledge, but he takes the knowledge forward. He becomes that Superman. And that's what Fard did with Elijah Muhammad, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. He took the message forward like a Superman and raised other men to be supermen, the FOY, and superwomen, the MGT. So no, and I don't see them as honoring the Superman, the real messenger, the real Lord in person. I'm not even going to say God in person, Lord in person. Because, again, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad established law and order within the nation. He cleaned people up. Again, anybody could come, because let's just say the Honorable Elijah Muhammad abandoned his post. Let's just say after Fard left, Elijah Muhammad said, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, I don't want to do this no more. This too hard. I'm going to jail. I'm getting locked up for evading the draft, even though he's 45 years old. What if he said, I don't want to do this no more? Then what good would Fard's work have done if the Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't step up? What good would the teachings have been if the Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't have the strength, the wherewithal, and that Superman power of energy and focus to be disciplined to carry it forward? Where would it have been? There would have been no Malcolm X. If Elijah Muhammad would have said, if the Honorable Elijah Muhammad would have said in 1936, 1937, oh, I made enough money off this, I'm out, I'm not doing this no more, I'm going to leave this behind. Eventually, the nation would have broke down. It wouldn't have been the same under somebody else. It would have been like the Moorish Science Temple, just a shadow movement like the Moorish Science Temple. The Nation of Islam wouldn't have rose to popularity had it not been for the most honorable Elijah Muhammad that gave a charge to Islam, gave a charge through what Freemasonry added and things like that. He modernized Islam. He made it cool to be a Muslim. So the honorable Elijah Muhammad took that forward. He went leaps and bounds beyond what Fard could imagine with the nation. You see? So, again, the nation got it backwards and the world got it backwards. They don't honor the Superman, I should say. They don't honor the Superman, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. They honor Joel, the father, the guy who's sitting in the corner giving out the knowledge but not putting in the real work for real. Again, 3.5 years don't equal up to 40. I don't care what nobody say. So, people need to, it works in the ultra standing of, who we should look to as the real supermen who are coming to lead men forward, lead and raise our people and raise our men going forward and our women. You see, we got to know what the attributes of a Superman is, or a Superman is. We have to know one who raises other men and women. Raises a people. That's a Superman. That was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You wouldn't have had no Shahrazad Ali. You wouldn't have had Minister Farrakhan. You wouldn't have had Malcolm X. You wouldn't have had Clarence 13 X. You wouldn't have had Khalid Muhammad. You wouldn't have had Muhammad Ali. And the list goes on and on and on. You wouldn't have had none of these people if it would not been for the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the real Superman of his day and time. But that's it. I stand on that message and I close out. And I'm not trust, and I'm not think, and I'm not continue forward forever. I'm done.